He stole 6 weeks of my work with nothing more than a wink and that practiced smile of his. So I gave him a gift. My draft containing 17 tiny, fatal errors. The bastard had no idea he'd just delivered a ticking time bomb straight to the board of directors. By the time they discovered what happened, his career would be nothing but smoking ruins. And I'd still be sitting at my desk, innocent as morning snow. My name is Jessica Monroe, and I've spent the last 5 years at Aurora Strateg learning a simple truth. In corporate America, it's not enough to be good at your job. You have to be good at protecting what's yours. I'm 34, single by choice, and I've built my reputation one meticulously crafted report at a time. As a senior data analyst at one of Denver's most prestigious business strategy consulting firms, I live in spreadsheets and breathe statistical models. My colleagues joke that I see patterns in my sleep. They're not wrong. But what I really see are the patterns in people, the subtle shifts in behavior that telegraph their true intentions long before they act. Kyle Redmond joined our team 18 months ago. All white teeth and firm handshakes. Harvard MBA. He'd mention within 5 minutes of meeting anyone new. His cologne arrived in meetings 30 seconds before he did. A cloud of expensive musk that made my nose itch. From day one, he mastered the art of strategic positioning, always sitting where the partners could see him, always laughing just a beat too long at their jokes. "Jessica, you're a godsend," he'd say, leaning over my cubicle wall with that practiced concern. "I don't know how you manage all this data. Mind if I take a look? I'm trying to learn from the best." I should have seen it then. The way his eyes would scan my screen, memorizing my methodology. The way he'd show up to meetings with insights that sounded suspiciously like conversations we'd had the day before. But I was focused on the work. On the promotion to Regional Analysis Team Lead that Margot Halston, our director, had been dangling for the past year. The first time Kyle stole from me, it was small. 3 slides from my quarterly market analysis appeared in his presentation to the Portland office. My slides, my data points, my conclusions, but his name in the corner. When I mentioned it to Margot, she waved her manicured hand dismissively. "Collaboration is key here, Jessica. We're all on the same team." Easy for her to say. In her world, Kyle was exactly the kind of go-getter Aurora needed more of. Young, aggressive, male. The unspoken bias hung in the air like Kyle's cologne, persistent and suffocating. I started documenting everything after that. Every email, every shared file, every casual conversation by the coffee machine where Kyle would fish for information about my current projects. My personal laptop at home became a fortress of backup files, timestamps, and paper trails. Paranoid? Maybe. But in a workplace where credit was currency and visibility was everything, I couldn't afford to be naive. The opportunity that would change everything came in March, the Meridian Group contract. One of Seattle's largest retail conglomerates was looking to expand into new markets, and they needed a comprehensive strategic analysis. Margot assigned it to our team with clear instructions. Whoever delivered the best work would lead the presentation and likely secure the team lead position. "This is it," she announced in our Monday meeting, her eyes lingering on Kyle. "Show me what you're capable of." For 6 weeks, I lived that report. I analyzed 5 years of market data, built predictive models for 12 different expansion scenarios, created visualizations that made complex demographics sing. I interviewed 17 regional managers, studied foot traffic patterns, examined supply chain logistics until I could recite delivery routes in my sleep. Kyle circled like a vulture, offering help I didn't need, asking questions I shouldn't have answered, but I was careful. The real report lived on my personal laptop, transferred to the company server only when absolutely necessary, and always with limited access. Or so I thought. The morning of April 15th, 48 hours before the client presentation, I arrived at the office to find Kyle's desk empty and Margot's door closed. Through the glass, I could see him gesturing animatedly. Papers spread across her desk. My papers. My report. The blood in my veins turned to ice water as I watched Margot's face light up, watched her nod approvingly at something Kyle was explaining. By the time I reached my desk, the email was already waiting. Team. Exceptional work on the meridian analysis. Kyle will be leading Thursday's presentation. Please direct any supporting materials to him by EOD. M. I stared at the screen until the words blurred. 6 weeks of 100-hour weeks, of canceled dinners and forgotten birthdays, of dreams where I calculated market penetration rates, gone, stolen, and I knew exactly how he'd done it. Our shared drive had a glitch where files saved after midnight sometimes showed incorrect access permissions. Kyle must have been watching, waiting for me to work late, to make that one tired mistake. But Kyle Redmond had made a mistake too. He'd assumed I was just another quiet analyst who would accept this injustice, who would collaborate and smile and watch him accept praise for my work. He had no idea who he was dealing with. The theft happened at 2:47 a.m. on a Tuesday. I know because I'd been tracking the access logs religiously since the Portland incident. Kyle had downloaded my final report, 6 weeks of blood, sweat, and caffeine crystallized into 47 pages of strategic brilliance, and by 8 a.m., he'd slapped his name on it and hand-delivered it to Margot like a cat presenting a dead bird. I sat at my desk, fingers frozen over my keyboard, watching him through the glass walls of Margot's office. He was using my hand gestures, the ones I'd practiced in my bathroom mirror. He was explaining my demographic heat maps, my innovative approach to supply chain optimization, my breakthrough in identifying underserved market segments. Margot was eating it up, her face animated with the kind of enthusiasm she'd never shown when I presented. Jessica. Linda from accounting touched my shoulder. You okay? You look pale. Fine. I managed, though my throat felt lined with sandpaper. The all-staff email came at 9:15. Team, I'm thrilled to announce that Kyle Redmond will be leading our presentation to the Meridian Group this Thursday. His innovative analysis has set a new standard for strategic thinking at Aurora. Please join me in congratulating him on this exceptional work. Innovative. Exceptional. My phone buzzed with texts from colleagues who knew the truth. This is bullshit, wrote Tom from IT. Everyone knows you lived in the office for this project. But knowing and proving were different things. And even if I could prove it, what then? Make waves, be labeled difficult, watch my carefully built reputation dissolve into Jessica Monroe, the woman who couldn't collaborate? I didn't respond to the texts. Instead, I walked calmly to the bathroom, locked myself in the furthest stall, and silently screamed into my hands until my throat burned. Then I washed my face, reapplied my lipstick, and went back to my desk. Congratulations, I said when Kyle stopped by, his smile so wide I could count his veneered molars. The report looks great. Thanks, Jess. He had the audacity to look humble. Couldn't have done it without your input. You know, those late-night discussions really helped shape my thinking. Late-night discussions. We'd had exactly one conversation about the project, 3 weeks ago by the printer, where I'd mentioned I was analyzing foot traffic patterns. Now, apparently, that constituted collaboration in his revisionist history. Happy to help, I said, my smile mirror bright and just as false. The worst part came that afternoon. Margot called a meeting to discuss support for Thursday's presentation. She stood at the whiteboard, Kyle beside her like a crown prince, while she outlined the agenda. My agenda. My structure. My strategic narrative arc that I'd refined through 17 different iterations. Jessica, I'll need you to prepare the background slides on regional demographics, Margot said without looking at me. Nothing too complex, Kyle will handle the analytical heavy lifting. Background slides. After 6 weeks of breakthrough analysis, I'd been reduced to making pretty pictures for Kyle's stolen show. Of course, I heard myself say. But as I sat there, watching Kyle nod thoughtfully at questions about methodology he didn't understand, watching Margot beam at him like he'd invented data analysis, something crystallized in my mind. They'd made a crucial error in their casual cruelty. They'd forgotten that I still had access to everything. That night, I didn't go home. I sat in my car in the parking garage, laptop open, studying every line of the report Kyle had submitted. He'd been smart enough to change some formatting, rearrange a few sections, add some of his trademark business school jargon. But the bones were mine. Every calculation, every insight, every carefully constructed argument. And that's when I saw it. In his haste to claim credit, Kyle had grabbed the file labeled Meridian Final V3 Revised, not Meridian Final V4 Complete, version 3. The version I'd created before my final review. The version with selective vulnerabilities I'd been meaning to fix. Calculation errors hidden in formulas, demographic data from the wrong fiscal year, supply chain costs based on outdated fuel prices. 17 mistakes in total, each small enough to pass casual inspection but devastating when applied to real business decisions. I'd created V3 at 1 a.m., exhausted and making careless errors. I'd caught them all in V4, the real final version that still sat safely on my personal laptop. But Kyle, in his greed and arrogance, had stolen the wrong file. He'd been so eager to claim my work that he'd never bothered to verify it. A strange calm settled over me as I sat in that dark garage. Kyle thought he'd stolen my success. Instead, he'd stolen a time bomb. And in less than 48 hours, he was going to hand-deliver it to one of the largest retail conglomerates in the Pacific Northwest. I closed my laptop and drove home, where I carefully backed up the correct version of the report. V4, complete with documentation trails, correspondence logs, and every shred of evidence that proved the work was mine. Then I poured myself a glass of wine and raised it to the empty room. "Congratulations, Kyle," I said to the darkness. "It's all yours." Wednesday morning arrived with deceptive normalcy. I dressed carefully, my best navy suit, the one that made me look both professional and forgettable. Today was about being invisible, about letting Kyle shine in his stolen spotlight while I orchestrated his downfall from the shadows. The office buzzed with preparation for tomorrow's presentation. Kyle had commandeered the main conference room, spreading out my charts across the table like conquered territory. I watched him through the glass, noting how he fumbled with the demographic overlays, how he squinted at formulas he didn't understand. "Jessica!" He waved me over with the casual authority of someone who'd already rewritten history. "Quick question about these market penetration calculations." I stood in the doorway, not entering his temporary kingdom. "What about them?" "The formula in cell G47. It's showing 23% growth in the Southwest region. That seems high?" Cell G47. One of my 17 planted errors. The real growth was 12%. But I'd accidentally referenced the wrong year's data in the formula. My pulse remained steady. "That's what the data shows," I said with a shrug. "You've had the file for 2 days. I assumed you'd verified everything." His face flushed slightly. "Of course, I just wanted your perspective." "My perspective?" I let a small smile play at my lips. "Kyle, it's your analysis. I'm just here to make background slides, remember?" The jab landed. He turned back to the spreadsheet, jaw tight. Pride would prevent him from admitting he needed help, especially now, especially from me. I knew Kyle Redmond's type. I'd been studying him for 18 months. He'd rather present questionable data than admit he didn't understand the work he'd stolen. I spent the morning crafting my assigned background slides with meticulous care. They were perfect, professionally designed, clearly labeled, and completely authentic. When the investigation came, and it would come, these slides would show I'd done exactly what was asked of me. No more, no less. "Looking good, Jessica." Tom from IT peered over my shoulder. "Though it's weird seeing you doing grunt work on your own project." I kept my eyes on the screen. "It's Kyle's project now." Tom lowered his voice. "I kept the access logs from Monday night, the real ones, before they mysteriously updated Tuesday morning." My hands stilled on the keyboard. "That's interesting. Very interesting. Shows Kyle accessing files at 2:47 a.m. Shows him downloading Meridian Final V3 Revised." He paused. "Also shows you uploading V4 Complete at 3:15 a.m. to your personal secured folder." I finally looked at him. Tom's expression was carefully neutral, but his eyes held understanding. Sometimes systems glitch, I said quietly. Files get confused, version control fails. Exactly. He straightened up. Shame when people grab the wrong version, especially when they're in such a hurry. After he left, I allowed myself one moment of satisfaction. I wasn't alone in this. Others saw, others knew. But more importantly, others were documenting. That afternoon, I refined my trap. I created a new file, Meridian Support Docs Final, and uploaded it to the shared drive. Inside were the background slides Margot had requested. But I'd also included something else, a detailed methodology note explaining the calculations in V4, the correct version, dated, time-stamped, and digitally signed. If Kyle was smart, he'd review all support documents. If he was who I knew him to be, he'd ignore anything that wasn't immediately useful for his glory. At 4 p.m., Kyle sent a team email. Final presentation deck attached. Please review but do not modify. This version is locked for tomorrow's meeting. I opened the attachment. He'd made cosmetic changes, new fonts, his preferred color scheme, his photo on the title slide, but the bones remained unchanged. All 17 errors were intact, now dressed up in his personal branding. You staying late? Linda asked as she packed up for the day. Just a bit. Want to make sure everything's perfect for tomorrow. Kyle's lucky to have your support, she said, though her tone suggested she meant something else entirely. After the office emptied, I worked on my insurance policy. I documented everything, every timestamp, every version, every email. I created a comprehensive folder showing the evolution of the project from conception to final report. Most importantly, I included the corrected calculations with explanations of where V3 had gone wrong and why. At 9 p.m., I sent one email to my personal account. The subject line was innocuous. Backup, Personal Development Portfolio. The contents were anything but. As I packed up to leave, my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Heard about tomorrow. Also heard Kyle's been shopping the Meridian success as leverage for a job at Pinnacle Consulting. Thought you should know. A friend. Pinnacle Consulting, our biggest competitor. Kyle wasn't just stealing my work, he was using it as a launching pad out of Aurora, leaving me to clean up whatever mess he created. I sat back down at my desk and made one final adjustment to my plan. I opened the shared drive and created a new folder, Meridian Project, Archive. Inside, I placed V3, the flawed version Kyle had stolen, and V4, the correct version, both clearly labeled with creation dates and detailed version notes. Then I set the folder permissions to View Only, Restricted Access, and added a note. Archived per standard protocol. Do not modify. If anyone investigated later, they'd find I'd followed company procedure to the letter. 2 versions, clearly marked, properly archived. The fact that Kyle had grabbed the wrong one? Well, that would be his failure of due diligence. As I finally headed home, I passed the conference room where Kyle was still practicing. His reflection multiplied in the dark windows as he gestured at imaginary clients. He looked confident, authoritative, every inch the rising star he believed himself to be. Enjoy the spotlight. Kyle, I whispered to his reflection. It's going to burn. Thursday arrived wrapped in Seattle's typical gray drizzle. I chose my outfit carefully, professional but understated, the kind of forgettable ensemble that would let me blend into the background while Kyle performed his stolen show. I arrived early, made coffee, and settled at my desk with a clear view of the conference room. The Meridian Group delegation arrived at 9 a.m. sharp. 3 executives in identical charcoal suits, led by their CEO, Patricia Winters, a woman whose reputation for data-driven decision-making was legendary in retail circles. I watched them settle into the conference room, tablets out, prepared to dissect every claim. Kyle strutted in 5 minutes later, his confidence radiating like heat waves. Margot flanked him, playing the proud mentor, while the rest of our team filed in behind. I wasn't invited to the main presentation. Background slide creators didn't merit seats at the table, Instead, I watched through the glass walls, my laptop open to track the disaster in real time. Good morning, everyone. Kyle's voice carried through the thin walls. Today, I'm excited to share Aurora Strategies' comprehensive analysis of Meridian's expansion opportunities. My analysis, my opportunities. But not for much longer. The first 20 minutes went smoothly. Kyle had memorized my executive summary well enough to deliver it with conviction. He clicked through the market overview, the demographic breakdowns, the competitive landscape, all accurate enough to pass initial scrutiny. Patricia Winters nodded occasionally, making notes on her tablet. Then Kyle reached the financial projections, and I saw the first crack in his facade. As you can see, he said, laser pointer dancing across a graph. Our models show a 23% growth potential in the Southwest region within 18 months. Patricia's pen stopped moving. 23%? That's ambitious. Aggressive but achievable, Kyle responded, his Harvard MBA voice sliding into place. The data supports it. Except it didn't. The real data, sitting safely in V4 on my laptop, showed 12%. Kyle was presenting my sleepy 1 a.m. error as gospel truth. Can you walk us through the underlying assumptions? Patricia's CFO, a sharp-eyed man named David Krautz, leaned forward. I watched Kyle's Adam's apple bob as he swallowed. Of course, if we look at the demographic shifts. He clicked to the next slide, my slide, built on data from the wrong fiscal year. The numbers showed population growth in areas that had actually seen decline. Purchasing power increases in regions hit by factory closures. Kyle didn't know any of this. He was just reading my poisoned numbers with manufactured authority. I'm sorry, Patricia interrupted. Are these figures from FY 2023 or 2024? The room went silent. Even through the glass, I could see Kyle's knuckles whiten as he gripped the clicker. 2024, of course, he said. Lie. They were from 2022, accidentally pulled from an old dataset in my exhausted state, an error I'd caught and fixed in V4, but Kyle would never know that. David Krautz was already pulling up something on his tablet. That's interesting, because these population figures for Tucson don't match the latest Census Bureau releases. The temperature in the room shifted. Margot's smile tightened. Kyle's forehead developed a suspicious sheen. There might be some minor variations in data sources, Kyle attempted, but the overall trends, Mr. Redmond. Patricia's voice cut like ice. In retail expansion, there are no minor variations. There are correct numbers and incorrect numbers. Which are we looking at? The next 30 minutes were excruciating. Kyle tap danced through explanations he didn't understand, defended calculations he couldn't verify, and promised to circle back with clarifications on increasingly fundamental questions. Each of my 17 planted errors bloomed like toxic flowers under scrutiny. The supply chain costs based on pre-2023 fuel prices, David Krautz noticed. The demographic heat map that incorrectly weighted urban versus suburban growth, Patricia's head of operations caught it. The market penetration formula that double-counted certain retail categories. Their analyst found it within minutes. By slide 32, Kyle had stopped attempting explanations. He stood at the front of the room like a malfunctioning robot, clicking through slides he clearly didn't understand while three increasingly angry executives dissected his analysis. Enough! Patricia closed her tablet with a snap that echoed like a gunshot. Mr. Redmond, this is perhaps the most careless presentation I've seen in 20 years. You're asking us to make multi-million-dollar decisions based on fundamentally flawed data. I can explain, Kyle started. Please don't. She turned to Margot, whose face had gone the color of spoiled milk. Ms. Halston, I'm disappointed. Aurora came highly recommended, but if this is your standard of work... This is not our standard, Margot said quickly. I assure you, we'll conduct a thorough review. We'll conduct our own review. Patricia stood, her team following suit, starting with finding a consulting firm that can distinguish between fiscal years. Good day. The Meridian team filed out like a funeral procession. Through the glass. I watched Kyle sink into a chair, his stolen crown clattering to the floor. Margot's expression promised blood. I turned back to my screen and opened a new email. To Margot Halston. Subject: Meridian Project. Version control documentation. Hi Margot, I noticed there might be some confusion about the Meridian analysis. I've attached the version control log showing both V3, preliminary draft with uncorrected errors, and V4, final corrected version. V3 was uploaded at 1:15 a.m. on April 15th as a working draft. V4 was completed at 3:15 a.m. the same night after error correction. Both versions have been in the archived project folder since April 16th. Happy to walk through the differences. Jessica. I hit send and leaned back in my chair. The real presentation was about to begin. The summons came at 2:17 p.m., delivered by Margot's assistant with the grim efficiency of someone carrying a death warrant. Conference room A. Now, bring everything related to Meridian. I gathered my materials slowly, methodically, my laptop with its carefully preserved files, a printed binder containing every email, every timestamp, every version note. The weight of evidence felt satisfying in my arms. Conference room A had been transformed into a war room. Margot sat at the head of the table, flanked by Richard Steinberg from Legal and Diane Forrester from HR. Kyle occupied a chair like a condemned man. His earlier swagger evaporated. Tom from IT stood by the projection screen, laptop ready. Sit, Margot commanded, not looking up from the papers spread before her. I chose a seat directly across from Kyle. His eyes darted to mine, searching for something, sympathy, solidarity. He'd find neither. We've lost Meridian, Margot began, voice deadly quiet. Patricia Winters called our CEO personally, used words like gross incompetence and actionable negligence. They're considering legal action for the time and resources wasted. Richard Steinberg cleared his throat. We need to understand exactly what happened. The presentation contained 17 significant errors that any competent analyst should have caught. I can explain, Kyle started, but Margot's raised hand silenced him. Tom, show us the access logs. The screen lit up with system data. Tom's voice was professionally neutral as he narrated. April 15th, 2:47 a.m., Kyle Redman accessed the shared drive and downloaded Meridian Final V3 Revised. That was the most recent version available, Kyle interjected. Actually, I said quietly. It wasn't. All eyes turned to me. I opened my laptop and connected to the screen. May I? Margot nodded grimly. I navigated to the archived folder, showing the contents clearly. Here's V3, uploaded at 1:15 a.m., a preliminary draft with uncorrected errors. And here's V4, uploaded at 3:15 a.m., the final, corrected version. I didn't see V4, Kyle protested. Because you didn't look. Tom interjected. The access logs show you downloaded V3 at 2:47 a.m. and never accessed the system again before submitting the report to Margot at 8 a.m. I clicked through to my documentation. Here's my email to myself at 3:16 a.m., noting that V4 was complete and archived. Here's the version control log showing every change made between V3 and V4, with explanations for each correction. Why wasn't I notified about a new version? Kyle's voice pitched higher. Why were you accessing files at 2:47 a.m. without authorization? Diane from HR asked pointedly. The room fell silent. Kyle's mouth opened and closed like a landed fish. I pulled out my printed binder. I've documented the entire project timeline, 6 weeks of work, including correspondence showing I was the lead analyst, meeting notes where I presented the methodology, and emails where Kyle explicitly asked me to explain various aspects of the analysis. That was collaboration, Kyle said weakly. Was it? I flipped to a specific page. This email from April 10th shows you asking me to explain the demographic weighting system. This one from April 12th shows you asking about the supply chain calculations. And this one from April 14th, sent at 11 p.m., shows you asking for the latest version of the report. Richard Steinberg leaned forward. Ms. Monroe, are you saying Mr. Redmond took your work without attribution? I met his gaze steadily. I'm showing you documented evidence. You can draw your own conclusions. She's setting me up, Kyle burst out. She deliberately gave me a bad version. Stop. Margot's voice could have frozen fire. Are you admitting you took Ms. Monroe's work? The trap snapped shut. Kyle realized his mistake too late. We were collaborating. Collaboration involves attribution, Richard said. The report submitted to Ms. Halston had only your name on it. The presentation materials credited only you. Where exactly is Ms. Monroe's contribution acknowledged? Silence. Tom cleared his throat. There's more. I've found irregularities in how Kyle's access permissions were elevated. It appears he used a system vulnerability to access files marked as restricted to the project lead. I didn't, Kyle stammered. The digital forensics say otherwise, Tom continued. I have a full report for IT security. Diane from HR was taking rapid notes. Mr. Redmond, based on what we're seeing, you've potentially violated multiple company policies: intellectual property theft, unauthorized system access, misrepresentation of work product. It goes beyond that, I said quietly. Everyone turned to me again. I believe Kyle was planning to use this report for personal gain. I produced my phone, showing the text about Pinnacle Consulting. I received this yesterday. Kyle was apparently positioning the Meridian analysis as his own work to secure a position with our competitor. Richard Steinberg's face darkened. That would violate his non-compete agreement and confidentiality clauses. Kyle's face had gone gray. You can't prove that. We'll let legal determine what we can prove, Margot said. She turned to me, and for the first time in 2 years, I saw something like respect in her eyes. Jessica, walk me through V4, the correct version. For the next hour, I presented my real work. The accurate data, the verified calculations, the strategic insights that had taken 6 weeks to develop. I explained every methodology, every source, every decision. No stolen glamour, no borrowed authority, just competent, thorough analysis. When I finished, Patricia Winters was on speakerphone. Margot had called her back. This is the level of work we expected, Patricia said after reviewing the corrected analysis. Why wasn't this presented this morning? An internal failure we're currently addressing, Margot responded, eyes never leaving Kyle's slouched form. Jessica Monroe was the actual lead analyst on this project. Would Meridian consider a follow-up presentation with the correct data and the right presenter? There was a pause. Send Ms. Monroe tomorrow at 10 a.m. Alone. After Patricia hung up, Margot turned to Kyle. Clean out your desk. Security will escort you. You can't. I can and I am. Legal will be in touch about the non-compete violation and potential damages from the Meridian situation. As security led Kyle away, he shot me one last look, hatred mixed with disbelief. He still didn't understand how the predator had become prey. Margot dismissed everyone except me. When we were alone, she steepled her fingers. The team lead position. It's yours, effective Monday. I nodded, feeling no triumph, just quiet satisfaction. Jessica, she continued, I owe you an apology. I should have seen what was happening. Yes, I agreed. You should have. She blinked at my directness but nodded. Make sure it doesn't happen again. To you or anyone under your leadership. Count on it. As I gathered my materials, Margot asked, Did you know he'd take the wrong version? I paused at the door. I knew Kyle would take whatever he could access at 2:47 a.m. without bothering to verify it. Whether that was V3 or V4 was entirely his choice. I left her pondering that, walking past Kyle's empty desk with its dark monitor and vacant chair. The vulture had choked on stolen carrion, exactly as I'd known he would. Justice, I reflected, sometimes comes with 17 small errors and a timestamp. The aftermath unfolded with the devastating precision of falling dominoes. By Friday evening, Kyle Redmond's carefully constructed career lay in ruins, and the reverberations hadn't stopped. I presented to Meridian at 10 a.m. sharp, delivering the corrected analysis with quiet confidence. Patricia Winters sat in the same chair she'd occupied during yesterday's disaster, but her expression had shifted from fury to focused attention. I walked her team through every calculation, every projection, every strategic recommendation, this time with accurate data and transparent methodology. "This is what we expected from Aurora," Patricia said when I finished. "Thorough, precise, actionable." She paused. "I understand you were the original analyst on this project?" "Yes." "And yesterday's presenter was—" "A former colleague who is no longer with the company." Patricia's smile was sharp as winter wind. "I see. Well, Ms. Monroe, assuming legal clears up yesterday's concerns, we're prepared to move forward, with you as our primary contact." The contract was worth $3.2 million. I'd saved it with 17 deliberate errors and a willingness to let a thief hang himself. Back at Aurora, the office buzzed with the kind of electric gossip that follows public executions. Kyle's desk had been cleared overnight, his nameplate replaced by blank plastic. But the real devastation was still unfolding. "Jessica." Richard Steinberg appeared at my cubicle Monday morning, looking like a man who'd spent his weekend in depositions. "We need to discuss the full extent of Mr. Redmond's activities." In conference room B, smaller, more private, Richard laid out what legal had uncovered. Its forensic analysis found more than just the Meridian theft. Kyle had been systematically accessing restricted files for months, copying strategies, client lists, proprietary methodologies. His personal cloud storage was a treasure trove of Aurora's intellectual property. "Pinnacle Consulting?" I asked. "Among others." He was shopping himself to 4 different firms, using stolen work as his portfolio. Richard's disgust was palpable. "We've issued cease and desist letters. We're also pursuing criminal charges for corporate espionage." "What about his Harvard MBA?" I couldn't resist asking. Richard's smile was grim. "Interesting you mentioned that. HR's verification found some discrepancies in his credentials. He attended Harvard, yes. The MBA part is less clear." The justice was poetic. Kyle had built his house on a foundation of lies, and now every brick was being examined. Tom from IT stopped by that afternoon. "Thought you'd want to know. We've implemented new security protocols. The vulnerability Kyle exploited has been patched. We're also adding authentication layers for any downloads between midnight and 6 a.m. The 2:47 a.m. special." "Exactly." He grinned. "We're calling it the Redmond Rule internally." By Wednesday, Margot had restructured the entire team. My promotion to team lead came with a significant raise and, more importantly, direct reporting to senior management. No more filtered communications, no more stolen thunder. "I need you to review all ongoing projects," Margot said during our first official one-on-one. "I want to know if there are any other attribution issues we need to address." There were. 2 junior analysts came forward with stories of Kyle collaborating on their work. One had emails showing Kyle promising to mention her contribution in a presentation where her name never appeared. Another had watched Kyle present her innovative pricing model as his own breakthrough. "Why didn't they report it?" I asked Margot. Her smile was rueful. "Why didn't you? Until now?" The truth stung. We'd all been trapped in the same web of power dynamics and unspoken rules. Kyle had thrived in that ecosystem, a parasite feeding on others' fear of being labeled difficult. Thursday brought the final piece of news. Diane from HR delivered it personally. Pinnacle Consulting has withdrawn their offer to Kyle. Apparently, someone sent them an anonymous tip about his background. They did their own investigation and found the pattern of theft going back to his previous 2 employers. Anonymous tip? I kept my face neutral. Very anonymous. Included documentation that could only have come from someone with intimate knowledge of his methods. Diane's expression suggested she wasn't fooled. Whoever sent it did the industry a favor. I thought of the email I'd sent from a burner account, accompanied by public records and freely available information about Kyle's trail of destruction. Sometimes justice needs a push. 2 weeks later, Aurora sent out a company-wide memo about new policies for work attribution and intellectual property protection, the Jessica Monroe Protocol. Tom jokingly called it, though officially it was the Collaborative Attribution Standards. The Meridian project proceeded smoothly under my leadership. Patricia Winters became one of my strongest professional advocates, recommending Aurora, specifically my team, to 3 other major retailers. Kyle Redman vanished from the industry like smoke. Last I heard, he was working for his uncle's car dealership in New Jersey, his consulting dreams as dead as his reputation. LinkedIn showed his profile stripped of all the stolen accomplishments, reduced to a sparse timeline of verified mediocrity. But the real victory sat in my new office. Yes, office. With walls and a door that locked. On my desk was a simple framed printout. The system log from April 15, 2:47 a.m. My reminder that thieves who work in darkness sometimes steal their own destruction. I looked at it every morning and smiled. Kyle had thought he was stealing 6 weeks of work. Instead, he'd stolen 17 errors and a one-way ticket to career oblivion. The best trap, I'd learned, is the one that lets the rat think he's found cheese. 6 months after Kyle's spectacular downfall, I stood in my office watching the Denver skyline paint itself in sunset colors. The Meridian contract had exceeded projections. My team had landed 3 more major clients. And Aurora's reputation had not only recovered, but strengthened. Patricia Winters had even sent a handwritten note. Excellence recognizes excellence. Thank you for restoring our faith. But the real moment of closure came on an ordinary Tuesday when I was cleaning out old files. Jessica? Linda from accounting knocked on my door. Someone left this for you at reception. No name. It was a plain manila envelope. Inside, a single sheet of paper with 5 words. You were right. I'm sorry. Kyle's handwriting. I stared at it for a long moment, then fed it through the shredder. Apologies from thieves are worth less than the paper they're written on. That evening, I created a new folder on my personal laptop, not for protection this time, but for progress. Inside, I placed the business plan for my own consulting firm, something I'd been developing in the quiet hours when the office emptied and ambition filled the space. Aurora had taught me valuable lessons. Kyle had taught me invaluable ones. Together, they'd shown me that waiting for recognition in a system designed to overlook you was its own form of theft. Theft of time, potential, and dreams. My resignation letter was professional, gracious even. I gave Margot 6 weeks' notice and offered to train my replacement. She took it better than expected. I suppose I saw this coming, she admitted. You're too smart to stay someone else's employee forever. I learned from the best, I said, and we both knew I didn't mean her. Monroe Strategic Analytics launched 3 months later with 2 clients, both referrals from Patricia Winters. My first hire was Tom from IT, who'd grown tired of catching corporate thieves after the fact. My second was one of the junior analysts Kyle had stolen from. Eager to work somewhere her contributions would bear her name. We built something different. Every project carried clear attribution, every idea had a paper trail. Every success was shared with the person who earned it. It was amazing how much brilliance emerged when people knew their work wouldn't be stolen. The last time I thought about Kyle was a year later, when LinkedIn suggested I might know him. His profile showed he'd moved 3 times, each position lasting fewer months than the last. The Harvard MBA had disappeared from his credentials entirely. In his photo, the golden boy smile had curdled into something desperate. I didn't click. Some stories are better left ended. My company grew. We specialized in forensic analysis, helping businesses understand not just what their data said, but what their competitors were hiding. Turns out, teaching a thief's methods made me excellent at catching them. Late at night, when I reviewed contracts worth more than I'd ever dreamed of earning at Aurora, I sometimes thought about that moment in the parking garage, the moment I realized Kyle had stolen the wrong file, the moment I chose justice over victimhood. Some might say I was cruel, that I should have warned him, stopped him, saved him from himself. But Kyle had made his choice at 2:47 a.m., driven by greed and the assumption that my silence meant compliance. He'd gambled that I was too nice, too professional, too female to fight back. He'd lost that bet. I kept one memento from Aurora, not the system log I'd originally framed, but something better. An email from one of the junior analysts Kyle had stolen from. Watching you take him down gave me courage. I've started signing my work in meetings, speaking up, taking credit. Thank you for showing me it's possible. That's the thing about thieves in tailored suits. They don't just steal work, they steal confidence, voices, futures. They create ecosystems of silence where their kind can flourish. But they're afraid of one thing: someone who keeps receipts and knows how to use them. In my new office, corner suite, floor-to-ceiling windows, my name on the door in gold letters. I opened my laptop and created one final folder. Let them steal again. This time, it was empty. A reminder, not a trap. Because the best revenge isn't destroying those who wrong you. It's building something so successful, so undeniably yours, that their theft becomes nothing more than a footnote in your origin story. Kyle Redmond tried to steal my future. Instead, he freed me to build it myself. And somewhere in Denver, in offices just like Aurora's, other quiet analysts are learning to document everything, archive strategically, and wait for their moment. Sometimes, 17 errors can change everything. Sometimes, the thief steals exactly what you want them to. Sometimes, silence is the loudest form of justice. Thank you so much for listening to this story of workplace revenge and sweet justice. I'm curious, where are you listening to this story right now? Are you on your commute, at home, maybe even at your own office plotting against your own Kyle? Drop a comment below and let me know. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more stories of clever revenge and workplace justice. And please, share your thoughts. Have you ever dealt with a credit-stealing colleague? How did you handle it? I'd love to hear your experiences in the comments. Until next time, remember, always keep your receipts.